Welcome to Season 5 of the Founders Only podcast, where we uncover the pivotal trials and triumphs in the stories of great founders, delivering actionable advice on how to be the leader of the pack. I am so excited to welcome my guest today, Matt Verlaque. After over a decade of service as a firefighter, Matt accidentally started his first SaaS company, UpLaunch, in 2016 and served as the CEO of UpLaunch through its successful acquisition in 2020. Since then, he's been the COO of SaaS Academy, helping to train and coach over 500. I think it's a lot more than that now, right?
Yeah, I guess cumulatively it's a lot more than that. Yeah, we've got 500 right now.
Yes, SaaS founders to build the business of their dreams and find the perfect exit, right? Exactly. Outside of his work, Matt's devoted himself to his family as a husband and a father of 3 mini sidekicks, and spends his spare time weightlifting, running, biking, and being awesome. So, yeah, I'm so excited to welcome my friend here. Okay, so let's just jump right in, Matt. So, cool. Can you share your journey to becoming the founder of UpLaunch?
Yeah, I love that you used my little quip about it being accidental. So my journey to starting my first company was not deliberate like it is for a lot of people. I was happy in the fire department. I loved what I was doing. I was going to stay there for 35 years and retire and all that good stuff. And, it started with my buddy Jake. He's one of my best friends in the world. He and I worked together in the same firehouse on the same shift. So we spent like 1 out of every 3 days together. And he started a CrossFit gym in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where he lives. And he and I are both just problem-solving, entrepreneurial type people. And so, he's talking about the gym and, he's doing construction and permitting and getting it built out. And then it switched gears to technology and websites and marketing. And I had kind of been like a closet nerd, in school. And I'd done some coding back in the day, like writing raw HTML in Notepad files to build websites. I learned HTML4 from a book from Barnes and Noble. That's where I started, and it was beautiful. But I started making some extremely mediocre websites for gyms. I did Jake's, and a couple of others in our local area. But one thing kind of led to another, and the problem that we ended up wrestling with that started to give us some success was around marketing automation. And this was 2016. It wasn't like cool yet. You had like Aweber and Infusionsoft and a couple of those solutions, but it wasn't like it is today, almost 10 years later, where everyone knows exactly what you're talking about when you say that. And what we found is that we didn't really know how to solve the problem of, Jake is the face of this local business and he's riding fire trucks for 60 hours a week. But when he's busy, that's the only way for a lead to get responded to. And, a lot of these gyms, especially the small ones, they just were really, really bad at getting back to people, right? You would submit the little form on the website, it would go to someone's phone and it would get ignored. And that was that. It was crazy. So we started building out some marketing automation campaigns. They worked, to our surprise. So then we just started helping other people. It's kind of started from a place of service. Then we built a little product around it. It was called Couch to CrossFit in 2016. I think it was 2015 going into 2016. It was like your New Year's resolution, get off the couch kind of thing. Jake went on a podcast, gave it away, had like 1,000 people download it. And we had this bright idea of, well, let's like offer an upsell for $100 and, I'll set it up the same way I set it up for your gym. It was like, yeah, maybe 12 people will buy it, whatever. It'd be like, cool, get some money. So 100 people bought it in 3 days. And I said, holy shit, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. And we like got all our buddies and rented a conference room and I like made SOPs and everyone's filling out all the forms. And I was like, all right, there's some demand for this. And then from that, we ended up pre-selling subscriptions to a software platform that didn't exist yet. Which at the time we were going to call Box Builder. CrossFit gyms are called boxes in the little slang. And so, just to basically set up this turnkey marketing automation for them. And that led to building our own actual software platform once we proved the concept, and that became UpLaunch and we were off to the races. So it was just kind of figuring out the next right thing, and the market kept telling us they wanted it, so we kept doing it.
I love this story because so many that I do talk to were so intentional about starting a business. You got people like me who are just like had a business since I was 7. So it's just like in our blood. And then you have people who just happen upon a problem and a solution and go out and solve it. And I just love these kind of outlier stories about this. So tell me about who Matt was before he became an entrepreneur, and maybe even before he became a firefighter.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Where do we begin? I moved around a lot as a kid. It was just me and my mom, like single parent household, which left us pretty resourceful. And mom did, I think, a really good job of instilling like the values of hard work in me. I started working when I was 14, 15. She always was working 2 jobs. We didn't have a ton, but like we worked really hard and we were super tight, especially growing up, which was cool. And I left for college. I settled for high school in New York, but I've been to like 12 different schools, from first grade to 12th grade. But I did high school in New York and then left to go to college to study business, funny enough. And I made it through the first year, but like really like the first half of the year, then I was kind of BSing my way through the second half of the year. And what I found was it was really frustrating for me because I don't love theoretical learning, and especially at that young age, I hadn't yet built my delayed gratification muscle. Honestly, sometimes I still struggle with it, right? I want everything right now. It's going to be a blessing and a curse. But, so I go to college and I'm like, I'm going to study business, and my expectations is they're going to teach me about business. And I'm over here doing art history and English and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, all right, this isn't really doing it for me. I'd gone home for winter break to go home and do the holiday thing. And I was working in a sandwich shop in New York trying to get some extra money. And I like delivered a order of sandwiches to the Firehouse down the street, which is in like a little town in Long Island, right? It was like nothing going on. And they were like, oh, you should join the Firehouse. It was a volunteer firehouse. I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. I'll learn something new. It sounds good. It's more exciting than going to art history class, whatever. And so I was going to college in Philly, driving back up to New York on the weekends to do the fire school thing. And I realized that I liked it, but there wasn't enough happening there to actually scratch the itch. It took me like 3 months to learn how to turn on a fire hydrant. And I'm like, all right, if I want to do this, I want to do it, right? And so it was interesting because there's parallels between this decision and leaving the fire department a decade later to start the company. I just kind of bailed. I packed my stuff. I was done with college after the first year. I moved. That's when I came down here to Maryland, where we both live. I moved into a firehouse in Prince George's County where they had like a volunteer program where you could live there full time if you volunteered. So I moved into Langley Park, Maryland, and lived there in the firehouse and got more experience than I ever could have dreamed of getting in a super busy neighborhood. And that led to me, 5 years later, doing it full time and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I came up, what led me to the fire department. I don't know. I'm kind of just all in or all out on everything I do.
You have such a curiosity in you. Like it's really, you like challenges from what I know about you. You like challenges, but when you're presented with something you want to explore it, I think you nailed it in explaining that you kind of go all in, but like even more than that, like these are really challenging things you've picked.
Yeah.
Like most people are going to be like, oh no, I'm not joining the fire department.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you picked one of the most dangerous professions. I mean, how do you reconcile that, Matt?
I don't know. It's interesting because I think that it's true when I look backwards, but it didn't factor into the decisions. I just tried something and enjoyed it and said, I'm going to go do more of that and see what happens. I think it's interesting because I don't want to sound like I took it lightly. I guess I kind of did, but I don't know. I think it's just one of those things where I've, for whatever reason, given myself the freedom to just try to explore. And it was one of those, like Mia, it was a mess. Like, I was like, I didn't have a car. Like my buddy always jokes. He was at the firehouse the day I showed up, and he's like, "You came in here on your like 1988 Celica that was like rusting out. You're sitting on a milk crate, like broke down as you rolled into the parking lot. Like I was, working at a pizza shop on the weekends to try to like get money together. And I say that because I don't want this to be one of those things where, it comes across a certain way where it's like, oh, I give myself the permission to explore. And like, okay, you got like money or whatever. Like I didn't have anything, right? I was literally walking to the pizza shop because my car was broken down, living in a firehouse, but it was one of those things where I just wanted to try it out, and then I did it, and it felt good. And I think that for me, I never felt like I was particularly good at school in high school. I was okay. The grades were decent. I definitely didn't thrive in college, and the fire department was the first thing that I felt like I was actually good at, and I could see that, I develop a skill, I go to a fire or I go to a call where someone's injured or whatever, and I can use the skill and make a bad situation better. And that was like the feedback loop that I was craving, which is what pissed me off about going to college, is like, there's no, I'm going to go learn about, Picasso and, use that to build a business next Thursday. And it shows me I'm doing a good job, right? I kind of need that reinforcement. So it was a very, immediate feedback loop where I learn something, I get on the fire truck and I go and I use it, and hopefully, and I see that in entrepreneurship too, where I can learn something. I can learn anything if I have a direct application for it. Like there's got to be a real need, and I'll go super hard and learn whatever I got to learn. But if it's just theoretical knowledge, I just get bored,
Are you more, do you think, or have you ever looked into the way that you specifically learn, like visual versus auditory versus hands-on? Are you more of a hands-on learner?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mix. I've never done anything officially to try to figure it out. I'm sure there's a test or something that I could probably take, but I enjoy reading. I don't really lock in the things that I read unless I write them down. Even in Slack at SaaS Academy, my job title says COO/writer downer, because I just take, a crazy amount of notes. It's the only way I can retain stuff. But it doesn't really get locked in until I can implement it. And so that's kind of I try to take like a just-in-time learning philosophy, where once I have the problem in front of me, I'll go figure it out. But ideally, it's consume the information, write the information to synthesize what I think, go put it in practice, get the feedback from how I did, whether I won or I lost or whatever, and then keep tweaking the approach. So it's probably a mix of all those different modalities, if I had to guess.
It sounds like you're a hands-on learner. I used to be a teacher, so
Yeah.
I had to explore this because my son, I was my son's teacher for a year when he was 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I was teaching the whole pre-K through 6th grade at that time at a private school. And my kid would be standing over the table all the time. I couldn't get him to sit down in my class and just pay attention. And I thought maybe he had ADHD or something. And so I started learning about how people learn and realized that my son, who's like a natural engineer, needs to touch things and write things down and all those things. So it's
sounds like me.
I think you might have a natural engineering type of brain and need to like experience something to actually really retain it and be able to put it back. Yeah. It doesn't mean you learn other ways or anything, or you don't like to read. It just means.
Yeah. But it's interesting because like when we were building Up Launch, that was one of my steps that I took, is I went to a coding boot camp and learned how to code. And I enjoy the way that challenges my brain, because I also appreciate like a concrete solution to problems, which you can't always have when you're, dealing with people. There's very few concrete solutions. But the code, it works or it doesn't, it meets the specifications or it doesn't. There's a lot of ways to get there, but at the end of the day, the outcome is generally a binary. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's nice when you have the kind of brain that wants to get things in a certain way. Writing software is a fun thing for that.
Yep. I agree. Well, so what about you as a kid? Like, what did you like to do? How did you like to spend your days? Were you playing sports? Did you have any specific hobbies, like when you were younger?
Yeah. I played some sports. I was never particularly good at any of them. I found a renewed love for like endurance sports and weightlifting as an adult. But yeah, I was never great at sports growing up. I think it's interesting. I don't have like a lot of clearly like well articulated hobbies from my childhood. I think as a high school kid, I was pretty much going to school and working, and that was it. Yeah, I don't know.
And what kind of work did your mom do?
So she did a few different things. Earlier in her career, she was a graphic designer. She did that, while I was coming up probably through about, I guess all the way through high school, probably. She was focused primarily on that. And then she actually pivoted her career later in life to work in nutrition. She was a nutritionist for a while at a gym when she moved down to Virginia. So yeah, a couple different routes.
Okay, so Matt, what would you say your superpower is?
I think if I had to pick one, it's probably taking a plan that a visionary type leader puts out there into the world and actually bringing it to life. That's like, and I can say these names because you know them, Dan and Johnny, both similarly minded leaders and a little different than me, where they're the visionary type, but they need somebody who can take that and break it down into what actually needs to be true to draw it out. That's what I love doing. It's not to say that I can't fill the visionary role. CEO companies, I absolutely can, but it's a lot of fun for me when someone brings an impossible task to the table and like, what would need to be true to actually get this done? I'm like, I don't know, but we'll go figure it out. And building that plan is something I really love doing, and I think I'm pretty good at.
What do you think is the first step for you when you are presented with someone else's vision or problem?
Mm-hmm.
What's the first thing? I've never thought about this question actually, but what's the first step you think to actually approaching it? Or even if it's an understanding or what have you, like, what is your process?
I have two first steps. One of them is a personal one, and then I'll answer the question in a way that probably applies to everybody. But for me, especially like at this stage of my life, having sold a company and everything like that, like I don't really do things unless I'm personally bought into why I'm doing them. That can't always be true for everyone. It certainly wasn't true for me in my earlier years, as I was kind of coming up in my career. So that's kind of a season to taste soundbite, if you will, but I think now at this stage in my life and career, I've got to know, why are we doing this? Like, what's the opportunity? Who are we helping, or who are we serving? What's it, going to do for everybody involved? Like, I've really, I don't know, pardon the expression, I gotta give a shit, right? I can't just like punch the ticket because someone said, hey, let's go do this thing. Like, it's gotta be like true values alignment with me, because the thing is like I don't believe in burnout as like a secondary effect of having too much work. I think it's a secondary effect of not having enough meaning in your work. Like, people can do an incredible amount of work if you have a really clear reason why you're doing it. It's personally important to you, right? If you have that mission, burnout's not a thing. You might get tired. You might have a tough season. You might have a tough couple of weeks and need to, go double down on sleep. But when I talk about like chronic long-term burnout, like I can't get out of bed type stuff, usually that's built up stress from doing something that's not aligned with your mission. And sometimes you have to do that, right, in life. But if you don't, I think it's important to realize once you've crossed that threshold in your own life and you can say, all right, I'm now in a position where I don't have to do things, for reasons other than, are they aligned with me? And when you can have that place where, like, yes, you want an economic outcome for yourself because it's kind of the scoreboard, but if you can look at a project and be like, I do this for free because it lights me up, that's pretty cool. So that's the first thing I do, is I make sure it's something that I want to do. Because again, I'm all in or all out. Like, I'm all switches and no dials, right? Like, I can't just casually like mess around with something. It's just not in my DNA. So if it's not a yes, it's a no, because I don't know how to go easy. So that's number one. And then let's say I've cleared that hurdle. I'm like, okay, I want to go do this. If it's someone else's plan, the very first thing I've got to do is understand how we're measuring success, because it's really easy, especially if you're working with a visionary type. Say, I want to go do this thing. I want to go whatever, climb this mountain, metaphorical mountain, so to speak. But if you don't actually agree on, at a granular level, what does it mean? Is it a revenue? Is it a number of customers? Is it a product getting launched? Is it a profit margin? Like, what does winning look like? If you don't know that, the risk is very real that you're going to do a whole lot of work in the exact opposite direction of where you need to be going and waste a whole lot of time and energy. So it's like, someone presents an idea, cool. Do I want to do this? Does it speak to me? If that's true, let's get very, very clear about where we're trying to go from some place that we can actually measure. And then from there, I'll start backing into plans and timelines and doing all that kind of stuff. But that's how I look at it.
That is golden right there. So you start with why, and then you identify, how do we measure success and know that we've actually reached the top of the mountain? What does that look like? Awesome. Awesome stuff. Okay. How do you approach building your personal brand while also growing the business?
It's difficult. And I think that so my personal brand, balancing it with the business, I think I make it more difficult than it has to be. And I'm trying to get better at this. There's this book, it's called Steal Like an Artist. I actually have it on my shelf behind me. It's a series of 3 books, but one of the big concepts in this is, you should be documenting when you're creating your content necessarily, as opposed to like sitting down to create. I'm not good at that yet. I think that I suffer from something, it sounds dramatic, but I do this thing that a lot of people do where they don't necessarily realize the things that they're doing in their day that would actually be of service to other people in their audience, in their world, if they would just take the time to explain what the hell it is they're doing. It's like Mia, you run multiple businesses, you've got agency, you've got SaaS, I know we've hiked together, we've talked business together, and there's a lot of brilliance in that brain. And it's like, but 90% of the things that you do in your day, you probably don't even notice that you do them, or you think it's normal, or you think it's boring, or everybody knows that. Like, I do the same thing. And so I think a big thing that I've been trying to get better at is working out loud, working in public, living out loud, whatever you want to call it, where you can talk through and explain and document the stuff you're doing, the decisions you're making, the situations you're in. Because if you do that, then it's not like a whole stack of net new production, especially if you have someone who can edit or help you synthesize your ideas, like the post-production side of it. If it's just the creation, you just got to talk about what you're doing. So I'm saying this partially to hold myself accountable, right? Because I don't necessarily do this all the time yet. I'll put my head down and work for days on end without putting anything out into the world. And there's probably 15 different things I could have talked about. It's a struggle for me, honestly. And it's something that I'm working to get better at. So yeah, hopefully maybe this can be my accountability mechanism, is talking about it.
Definitely feel you on this one, Matt. Yeah. And I think what I'm learning so I recently interviewed someone who I think has really started to figure this out. Mm-hmm. I think Dan's definitely figured it out. Yeah. And Johnny, I'm starting to see Johnny figuring out, and it's interesting to watch Johnny because I think, and I love that what he seems most comfortable talking about is his family. Yeah. And how he's making his life at home work, which it just thrills me. Yeah. But I think that you also had that same passion for your family, and maybe starting there, because, it might be that talking about business might not feel authentic yet. Mm-hmm. Even though we're in it, even though it's like day to day, it's like something maybe in our minds, me and you, that is like it could be a perfectionism thing that's like, oh, this is just, everybody knows this, I don't need to put this out, but I'm not, and it's hard to explain, actually. Gosh, I really understand exactly what you mean. But the point I was trying to make was, I talked to someone recently who I think has figured this out, and his advice was just do it. Just record. And that's, the quote from him was, don't try to create an audience, try to create a library of greatest hits.
Yes, I love that. We've had that same conversation on the YouTube side, right? Where, we're just like, we're going more in depth on, business and SaaS oriented, like long form YouTube right now. And of course I'm stressing about how many views is it getting? What's our 1 minute retention or click through rate? And being a nerd like I always am. But at the end of the day, Cooper, my video guy, was literally just like, look, at the end of the day, one of these will pop. And when it does, you will have a library of highly produced, highly competent, really well done, to your point, greatest hits album of, how to build a SaaS company. But the other idea I'll share that I learned from Dan Martell when I was talking through this is there's also a matching process between the type of content and the channel. And initially, I had been looking at my like personal brand funnel, right? Because again, I'm doing it to, attract SaaS founders so we can talk to them about SaaS Academy. That's the business need to do it. But I was looking at it as essentially social media as just an aggregate funnel step, right at the top of the funnel, and then probably like my email newsletter, and then having conversations with founders, right? And what he shared, especially from a content production standpoint, is that not every social media channel is at the same place in the funnel. And so the way that he looks at it is he looks at Instagram as the top of the funnel and YouTube as below that in the funnel. And so when you're talking about like when should I talk about business, part of the reason that I've felt challenged talking about business on Instagram and why I don't think it's performed is because I find it really difficult to actually deliver something useful in 60 seconds on a short form video. Not that it can't be done. There's people out there who are great at it. I'm just not great at it yet. But I think that I can do a better job in like a long form video, on my YouTube channel. And so I'm starting to work through the strategy now where on Instagram, it's going to be probably like 80%, family, working out, integrated life, general business stuff. That's not necessarily like, what are the top 5 behaviors of a customer success manager in a SaaS company, right? And then for the people where that hits and they want to go find out more, they can go deeper on the business stuff in my YouTube channel where I can actually take the time to like draw out the charts and draw out the graphs and like teach the way that I teach in the academy. And so I think that that's probably, it's like it feels inauthentic when there's a mismatch between the channel and the way that you're trying to deliver the content. So I think the more I can get clear on what type of messaging am I putting in which place, it'll probably help it feel a little bit less like I've got my right shoe on my left foot,
Definitely agree with that too. What we started doing was, and I know you were already doing this with Cooper, but I had started having someone on the marketing team interview me every week for 30 minutes. But I see a problem here because what we've been doing is she's been putting together questions and asking them. But instead, I just had this idea, maybe if I write down or wherever I have my to-do list, like I don't write down everything I do, right, for the day, but I have like a short list of things I need to get done today, right? Mm-hmm. And those are usually the things, that require a little bit more brain power than the other kind of menial tasks that I might be doing throughout the day. But if I were to take my list and just as I'm going through, write down one tip, one thing I learned, and then maybe try to record that might be better because I definitely am not thinking about creating content throughout my day. Like that is not what is on my radar. And I find that when we started recording, I was being very long-winded. Mm-hmm. And she would say, we got to shorten this down because I don't know how you answered my question in like 5 minutes. How do we get this narrowed down? Yeah. And so what I would do, because I'm a very, talkative person, is after I would explain it in 5 minutes, then I would try to basically summarize right after that, like what I came up with. But this is like almost like a workshop today for both of us.
Oh, good. Hopefully it helps someone else who's trying to figure this stuff out too. We'll all learn together.
Yeah. Maybe that'll help. Yeah. Okay. So let's hop over now to really like COO of SaaS Academy. So you are in this really unique position with the way that SaaS Academy is really positioned as a leader here in this space of helping to coach, train, up-level SaaS founders. Right? If there was only one piece of advice you could give every single member in SaaS Academy, when they first joined SaaS Academy, I know there's, we're all in different places and things and stages, but specifically how to optimize their go-to-market strategy. If they are, let's talk specifically about those that are under $1 million ARR.
Sure. My answer is always the same. I know exactly what it is. I can tell you. The one piece of advice is to know your numbers. Like you can't optimize a business based on your feelings. It's just what it comes down to. And I think that I see a lot of really smart people do a lot of really well-intentioned work, and for whatever reason are so hesitant to try to measure the results of what they're doing in a way that will actually inform, is this working or not? sometimes because it's hard, sometimes because it's emotional, sometimes because it's like, oh, I'm not big enough yet, or I don't need to like know all these numbers. The numbers will set you free. They will set you free from wasting your own time doing things that aren't working. And the only way you know it is to measure it. So my piece of advice, you can literally say, Matt, what's your piece of advice for any entrepreneur? And finish that sentence however you want. And my answer is always the same. Start with knowing your numbers. And what I mean by knowing your numbers is not just knowing your revenue, right? Like that is a great start. If you don't know that, please go learn it. But in general, right, there's levels to the game, right? So yes, I hope you know how much money you're making. The next level up is, the things that go into calculating for a recurring revenue business, like where is your growth ceiling going to come, right? So how many customers are you getting? What's your average revenue per account? What's your monthly churn? So you can at least say, like, I'm reasonably sure in 7 months, my company's going to stop growing unless I change something. And then, in the academy, we've got tools to help you figure out what to change. But the next level from that I think is actually where most entrepreneurs should be, is figuring out how to measure the return on your actions, right? Because revenue is a lagging indicator, right? In your company, in my company, all of our companies, we do 46 different things in a specific order, and the 46th thing in that chain reaction is revenue, right? And then 112 more things and profits at the end of that one. And so even if you just look at it really simply, let's say you've got a 60-day sales cycle. If the only thing you're paying attention to is revenue, you've got a 60-day lag time between anything you change showing you any type of sign that it's working or not working. And by the time you take that in, you've burned a whole calendar quarter. So you pretty much get to change things 4 times a year. That's a bummer, right? And so I love looking at things that are up the chain in metrics, right? All the way to a controllable input metric, meaning an action. Like if Mia makes 20 phone calls a day instead of 10, does the conversion rate hold the same? And what would that do to the sales funnel? And what do you need to change about the conversation, right? Because if you're like, every time I pick up the phone, X% of people want to talk to me about the sales conversation, you can start to tweak that number daily and, get a much tighter feedback loop. So it's really speed of learning is what it comes down to. So yeah, know your numbers is the advice, like just in and out, because that will tell you everything else you need to go fix and everything you need to go learn and who you need to hire and where you need to optimize and when you're going to plateau. It's like your business is a math problem. That's what it comes down to.
Business is a math problem. Another golden nugget. And also, I know that you really encourage people to look at their numbers, their key health metrics on a weekly basis, right?
Yep.
So that's another important tip from Matt, you guys, is...
Well, and you can say it from Amazon, really, because like I'll share this, and you can read about it in a book called Working Backwards. Colin Breyer's the guy's name. He was the guy who worked for Jeff Bezos when they created the Weekly Business Review. It's a great book. But the idea here is look at your numbers on a weekly basis. I like to look at them every Monday morning. So the business week is Monday to Sunday. So every Monday morning, I'm looking at the prior 7 days. And the questions I answer that I took directly from Amazon, there's 3 questions. What did my customer experience last week in the business? How did the business itself perform? And how are we tracking versus our goals? So like if you just answer those 3 questions, I say it like it's easy. It's hard. The bigger your business gets, the more complicated it'll get over time. But if you can just work towards answering those 3 questions, what I find is that entrepreneurs are really good at answering the second 2. They know how many deals they close and what their win rate is and all these numbers about how the machine is working and how they're trending towards their goals. But sometimes we don't always work from the customer backwards to figure out, like, how do I measure what they're experiencing? And so I think that sometimes that takes a little bit more work. But if you can do that, you can see those 3 answers clearly every single week. As long as you care, you won't miss. Over time, you won't miss.
Love that. And, I think I would add, because a lot of companies are customer first, and I particularly prefer to be employee first. Mm-hmm. And that's because I believe that when your employees are happy and they feel like they're driving value and they care about the mission and the vision, they'll make the customers happy. But I think that it could be good to also add in, how did your employees feel over the past week?
Sure. Yeah, no, 100%. And we've got some stuff implemented. Like we do call it like an employee pulse survey where we'll do like a weekly anonymous 3-question thing in Slack, and then they'll average out the results, and we can track like a weekly trend on, how the overall employee sentiment is and break it down by department, stuff like that. Again, it depends on your company size. Like, I'm an overbuilder. I did that same thing in my first company where there was like, I implemented when there was like 6 people. Like that was dumb, right? I should have just talked to them. But now in SaaS Academy, there's 50 people. I can't talk to 50 people every week. So it really helps us, once you hit a certain size.
So do you all do that in place of like one-on-ones, or do you still have one-on-ones manager to?
Yeah, we do. And I care a lot about the one-on-one process. So we do them every 2 weeks for 60 minutes is our rhythm for it. And we have a specific framework that we follow. I'm probably not surprised. In order to do that, I was doing them 30 minutes every week for a while, but I just found that a 30-minute window didn't actually allow enough space for me to have the types of conversations I wanted to have on the one-on-ones. And I get more mileage out of it as a manager if I do them less frequently, but for a longer duration. Because I try to make them feel unlike any other meeting, right? Like, a lot of the time I'll do them on the phone instead of on Zoom, just to switch that up. Sometimes I'll go outside and do like a walk and talk. Depends on who it's with, and if I think I need to look at some stuff or not. But the overall format for them, we start off with some wins, right? Just like what's going well over the past couple of weeks. If they have like, key goals or OKRs or, whatever framework people are using out there in the world, we do a quick review on those, make sure those are on track. But from there, like the meat of the conversation, we just call it discussions. And really, either of us can bring something to the table, but I like not the manager, like the direct report or the other person, to bring most of what they need. And I really try to hold a high standard for these meetings where I don't want you being like asking about like knickknacks at the work, right. And like, hey, can you look at this document? Like, right. I want to get into the real. I want to get into like career pathing and what are your goals, and coach me on this skill. And I ran into this problem with this team member. How do I handle it? Like, the stuff that there's never space for, that is all of it goes in the one-on-one. But then my favorite part is at the end where we do mandatory bi-directional feedback, right? So like if you were my boss and we were working together, the first thing is you would say to me, so I always like the higher ranking person or whatever in the relationship to be the one who gets vulnerable first, right? So if you're my boss, you would say to me like, hey Matt, can you tell me one thing that I did over the past couple of weeks that you liked? And I'll answer you. And then, okay, can you give me one piece of feedback about my leadership that I could change to get to the next level? And so I put myself in the hot seat, or in this case, if you're the boss, and you in the hot seat first, and then I'll deliver the same feedback to the person. Here's one thing that you did that I loved, and one thing I think you could do to get to the next level. But we can't skip that part. And it's really funny. Like, human beings are not wired to give candid feedback. And so if you start doing this with people you already have a relationship with, they're going to be like, oh, you did great. I don't have anything. And I'm like, no. Like, I don't care if I missed a semicolon on a slide deck 7 Mondays ago. Like, you have to give me something, right? Because I am not some perfect leader. I screw stuff up every single day. Every hour I make a mistake, right? And so it's just getting people past that feeling of discomfort that like, oh, I'm just like nitpicking or, whatever. And once you get used to giving that feedback, when something real happens, you're going to have built the muscle, and then you can give the feedback and it's not as big of a deal, which is what you really want, is like important feedback at the right time. So that's how we do the one-on-ones.
I love that. We use a lot of those tips, but not the last one, where I make sure that I get candid feedback. I like that from my direct reports, or managers get direct feedback from there. Yeah. I love that. Okay. So you mentioned working backwards, which I also loved. What's another either book or podcast or resource that has profoundly impacted your mindset as an entrepreneur?
My mindset as an entrepreneur. That's a good one. Give me a second. I'll give you a few. I really enjoyed Amp It Up by Frank Slootman, the CEO of Snowflake. I think he's taken like 3 companies public, so I'm pretty sure he knows what he's doing at this point. He's pretty legendary. And the thing that I enjoyed about that book from a mindset perspective is I think that there's like this common narrative that a lot of us will tell ourselves where, we can move at a certain velocity as a small startup, right? Like Mia, you and I go co-found a company together. It's two of us. We're like making 15 decisions every, 2 hours. And then we hire a few people and there's 6 of us. We can still fit in a kitchen table, we can still move really, really fast. And like, that's a super fun stage of company, right? And then we get bigger and there's 20 and there's 50. And a lot of the time we tell ourselves this stuff where it's like, oh, well, we can't move that fast anymore. We're a big company. We need to move. We need to slow down. We need to like take it easy and be really, really careful. And it's like one of these things that's a half truth, right? It's like, you can't do it the way you can do it when you can all fit at a kitchen table. That's true. But the thing that Frank says in this book is, and he says it all over the place, is like, velocity is one of the key success metrics of any large company. Is like, if you can build a leadership and management structure that still allows you to maintain like a high velocity throughput in all your decisions at scale, you will win a lot more compared to a company that lets themselves get slowed down because that's how we feel like we should do stuff because we're big now. I endearingly call it big company bullshit, right? I hope I can say it on this podcast. I'm sorry if I can't. You bleep it out. But like, that's just what I bucket all that stuff in, right? It's like, oh, we should be slow. We should do this. We should do that. Like, maybe we should like evaluate the gravity of the decision. And if it's a two-way door with a very small downside, we should just go try something and see what happens. Like, it might be all right, So I like that because I felt like it gave me permission. Frank has run multiple companies that are an order of magnitude larger than any company I'll probably ever run in my life. And if he can maintain that high velocity, awesome. I'm pretty sure I can too. So that was a good one.
Quick question about that one.
Sure.
The next one. Was his main point or tip to empower the people in your organization to make decisions to make more decisions on their own? Was that how you kind of reduce the bureaucracy or the slowness? Like, is that how you do that?
Yeah, it was a mix. I pulled up my notes from the book. So he's got like 5 steps, right? And so his 5 steps in order: raise your standards, pick up the pace, sharpen your focus, align your people, and transform your strategy. On the off chance that he listens to it, I think I just said them out of order. But anyway, the point is, if I just sum it up, it's a mix of I think 3 key themes. I think raising your standards is really important because I think that as leaders, sometimes we allow ourselves to explain away things that would bother us, but then we justify why it's okay because our company's a certain way now. That I've caught myself doing it, and I'm sure you've probably done it. We've all probably done it one way or another. And honestly, it's an anti-pattern that as leaders we should kill, right? Is keep the standard high. If it's uncomfortable, let it be uncomfortable, but keep the standard high. So I think that's kind of the foundation for all of it. But the thing that I loved, and I highlighted a quote about this when he talks about aligning your people. He says, you don't need to bring in reams of consultants to examine everything that's going on. What you needed on day one is to just ratchet up expectations, increase energy, increase urgency, increase intensity, just get the people aligned. And you have to know as a leader how to cultivate a fully aligned sense of urgency to get a team of people pushing in the same direction. So to your question, yeah, I feel like that's empowerment. I think it's a form of empowerment. It's saying look, we're not going to bring in some expert for $200,000 to come tell us 15 things we already knew. It's us. No one else is coming. So let's drive towards this goal we freaking mean it and go fast and go hard, but we're all in it together. Let's go. And I think that I love that vibe of company building. Mm-hmm. No one else is here. It's us. Let's go figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you have another book?
Yeah, I think the other one for me is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. This one comes up a lot. But I think that I don't know. My default mode is that everything's my fault. So if someone on my team screws up, the first thing I do is apologize. And I'm sorry that I let this happen. I'm sorry I didn't lead you well enough where you knew this wasn't okay. And so I think that it can be weaponized. So I think that if I tend to be a little self-deprecating sometimes. So I've found that in certain situations I take that too far, where I will take too much ownership, and sometimes the person might need to go. But I think that it's a good place to start from. Jerry Colon is this legendary CEO coach, and he asked this question to a lot of people. He says, I'll probably butcher it, but paraphrasing, it's essentially how did I contribute to this set of circumstances that I said I didn't want? It's like, so all these things are like, oh, they're happening to me, or my team is doing this or whatever. It's like, if you're a leader, you helped make it happen somehow. And if you don't take the time to go figure out how you contributed to creating the situation in the first place, you're never going to become a better leader. And you'll find over time that you might switch out the team, and everyone you hire is like the same person over and over again. Like, here's the secret. It's you. It's not them. You've got to lead them in a different way to get a different outcome. And so I think Jocko in his book did a really good job making that philosophy comprehensible for a lot more people. And I heard a lot more people talking about some derivative of that philosophy after he wrote his book than I did before. So I think it's a good one to bring up, because I think it hits for a lot of people who read it.
How did your experience as a firefighter impact? I assume you read that book after. Mm-hmm. I don't know when that book came out. So
yeah, I read it after.
Yeah. So you've learned a lot about leadership and extreme ownership and accountability being in that line of work before really diving into entrepreneurship. So what do you think kind of resonated with you most from that book that like you kind of learned more in the firefighting? Do you know what I'm asking?
I know what you're saying. So in the book, he teaches about a concept he calls it decentralized command, right? Where it's essentially like you don't need one head honcho micromanaging all the decisions for 1,000 people. And like the span of control in the Navy or the Marine Corps was like massive. I mean, you have these generals who are overseeing thousands and tens of thousands of people, right? I mean, it's a massive organization. Then I look at the fire department, I giggle, because I worked for a small fire department. We had like 73 to 75 people on shift in a given day, split into 2 battalions. So you figure that's 30 people per chief, give or take 35. And so the common theme between all of that for me was the importance of small unit leadership. I think that there were a lot of like morale challenges in the fire department that I was in when I was part of it. And there were a lot of it was staffing issues, and it was tough. You weren't able to go home when you thought you were, had to stay an extra 12 hours. And it was really tough for people with families. And so there's a lot of grumbling that comes along with that. And look, it was warranted. I mean, it sucks not being able to go home. But what I found, especially when I became a company officer, so I had a group of like 6 people who I was in charge of, was that I was able to carve out like this little oasis. It wasn't perfect, but generally the people that were there weren't pissed off every day. We were happy to be there. We cared about each other. We worked hard. We trained hard, did a good job on runs, because like my job as their company officer was to try to shield them from as much of that stuff as possible, and just be like, look, I can't control that, but what we can control is in this house, how we show up and the way we treat each other, and we're going to be exceptionally competent. And I was unapologetic. Going back to like Frank's book about raise your standards, I told them unapologetically, I'm like, I want us to be better than everyone. I want to be faster than everyone. I want to be more competent than everyone. Like, I want us to be the best people that show up to a fire. So like, get down with that, because that's what I'm trying to be. And once they realized that it was okay to say things like that, and they were like, all right, like, we want to be the best. We just anchored around that. And it was kind of like, forget everything that doesn't have to do with us. Some stuff is going to suck. We'll deal with it, whatever. But like, we're just going to focus on how we run our operation on our fire truck on today, Tuesday, whatever day it is, right? And that's what we can control. And so I think that I saw that come up in the book, where it's like decentralized command and pushing the decision makers, or the decision making, down to the people who are actually doing the work. It was a great way to lead, and I knew that it worked because that's how we did it.
That's awesome. I remember the best manager I've ever had in the past. You just described how she led.
Yeah.
And a small team, and kind of shielding us away from the BS that was happening in the overall company.
Yeah.
One more question. So I've been asking everybody this lately, how do you know you found product market fit? Because it seems like it's like this elusive thing, seriously. Mm-hmm. And I personally have been able to realize how easy it is to maybe find channel market fit or some other type of market fit and think that you found product market fit, but in fact it's something different. So how do you define finding product market fit?
This is one of those things that I think departs from the usual wisdom, right? Because especially for me, the guy who's like, always know your numbers. So yes, I'll give you a numbers answer, but it's not the whole answer, right? I mean, you should be able to see, like I would look at this in trend lines, right? Like things should be getting consistently easier, and you should see that in your numbers. So your sales cycles should be shortening, your acquisition costs are likely coming down, your monthly churn is likely coming down. If you're measuring net promoter score, it's likely going up. So there are ways that you can capture some of these numbers if you want to like abstract it past the channel into the product. But the overall thing, like I'll tell you how I knew I found it in our first company, is building a startup from nothing sucks. And anyone who's done it is probably laughing right now because I know exactly what I'm talking about. Like it is like chewing on glass, trying to get people to understand some stuff. You got no idea if it's going to work. Like you get on a call and they don't get it. And you're like, one of us is dumb and I don't even know which one of us it is, but someone here is not figuring this out, you know? It's like, it's crazy. It's statistically doomed to fail. Like there's 1,000 reasons not to do it. We do it anyway. And it stays difficult until that moment when it finally starts to change. And you're like, like, where did this customer come from? Why did this guy reach out to me? This guy has told me to stop talking and just take my credit card on the demo. Never had that happen before. This person texted my phone. He got my phone number from somebody else because he's like, there's no demos in 2 weeks and I want to do this right now. Can you find some room for me? Like crazy things start happening. And all of a sudden you've got this demand and your focus shifts from like, how do I make sure I get to survive 2 more weeks to how do I make sure I don't let all these people down who are showing me that they want what I've built? And so I think there's like a qualitative element of it too, where you'll see all your numbers going in the right direction, right? Costs coming down, customer counts going up, whatever. But you'll also like feel that there's not like a linear correlation between how hard you have to work and those numbers going up. Like it will start to get a little bit easier and your customers will start to pull you in their direction instead of you having to pull them in your direction. And so I think it's a bit of a mix between art and science on that one. And the other thing to realize is that product market fit is not a finish line. It's not a status that you achieve and then you have it and you're like, hooray, I've got my trophy, right? Like you can have it and lose it. You can have it and the needs of the market change and you lose it that way. You can make a bad product decision and lose it. You can change your pricing and lose it. You can go on Twitter and say something stupid and lose it, right? There's 1,000 ways to lose it once you've got it. And so I also look at it in the sense of it's one of these things that you will have to constantly evolve. The needs of the market are evolving. We're dealing with irrational humans walking around with all their feelings, you know what I mean? Like just crazy stuff. And what got you to quote unquote product market fit in 2021, in 2024 or 2030 might not be remotely close. And so I think it's a mix of being aware when it's happening and being aware when it's slipping away and trying to stay ahead of that because it's always going to be changing.
Great answer, Matt. My favorite answer so far for this.
Right.
Yes. I love that mixture of art and science, even though I can tell art history was your least favorite classic.
So that's why I say in the book of writing, right? I'm like, your business is 10% art, it's 90% science. But I do think that's true, you know.
But I 100% agree with you. And I think, yes, those numbers can actually, I mean, they're important. You need to know them. You need to track them. They will indicate some level of success, right? But the qualitative piece and lifetime value specifically, and the conversations you're having with your prospects and your customers, I think is the art side of that.
Yeah, because you can always game the numbers. You can always game the numbers, right? That's the thing. Like you can always say, oh, my acquisition cost went down. Well, maybe your ads used to suck and now they're better. Or my churn went down. Well, you put people on contracts, right? Like there's always ways, right? Where you're like, I see this problem and it's only a number. I'm going to go change the way my data shows.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's
technically, but not the actual value.
Exactly.
That's the thing. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, where can people find you on social, Matt?
Oh, I'm Matt Verlaque everywhere. That is me. So on Instagram, I'm pretty active. YouTube, putting out like long form business content every couple of weeks, trying to teach everything I know. MattVerlaque.com. I've got a newsletter that I send every few weeks as well. You can sign up for that. And if you're a B2B SaaS founder, come check out SaaS Academy because we'd love to have you in there.
Awesome stuff. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope this episode was as transformational for you as it was for me. We'll see you next time. Thanks.